Joining me in the studio is Fritz Pinnow. He is a Honduras-based journalist and documentary photographer specializing in illicit economies, violence, and development in Central America. Fritz, I want to start with this. The U.S. is accusing Maduro of being part of the so-called cartel of the Suns. Now, this is apparently an alleged, group of powerful officials in Venezuela who are involved in drug trafficking. Is Venezuela a narco state, essentially?
So the term narco state is always, it's a very big term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? This would mean that the state itself runs drug trafficking. And that in itself is pretty rare. But it's used a lot for political reasons, to basically also make accusations in this case, right? But in this case, we don't really know a lot about the cartel of the Suns. But what's very likely is that officials are involved, officials are paid off, and this is very, very typical of cartels. But we don't really know if they were directly involved. But this passive, basically letting it happen, that is already often enough to call it a narco state. But the irony of this is that actually Trump just pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was the president of Honduras, who ran also a narco state, according to the DEA and the CIA. So it's always a fishy term and used often for political reasons.
Understood. But what you're saying is it is true that the state plays some role in the trafficking of illicit drugs.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the second question here. The indictment includes allegations of Maduro's involvement in something called Tren de Aragua. Tell us more about that.
So gangs specifically also usually have kind of a contract, an unspoken contract with the government. And again, in this case, it's very similar that they let it happen, basically, but also that the government has peace in that certain sense. So, but the same kind of agreement we can see in Honduras often when, for example, the president works with the MS-13, and basically the MS-13 promises a calm neighborhood or promises control, and in turn, the government doesn't bother them or doesn't seize their regions or things like that. So yes, this collaboration likely has happened, but is not direct, they're not led by Maduro in that sense.
Just a moment ago, we were talking about the term narco state.
Yes.
Trump keeps using the term narco-terrorism. What exactly does that mean?
Narco-terrorism is a term that emerged with Pablo Escobar, especially when they started using car bombs in Colombia, where this connection is made between narco-trafficking and terrorism. But in itself, that is a bit misleading because it really only attaches violence to drug trafficking. But drug trafficking is so much more. There are businesses attached to this. There are governments attached to this. Far more governments than, let's say, only Venezuela. Also, officials and whole economies are connected to this illicit economy that is drug trafficking. And by only saying, oh, those are narco-terrorists, it reduces the entirety of what this illicit economy is.
So help us understand Maduro's connection to all of this. Is it his alleged connection to Tren de Aragua that enables people in the Trump administration to call him a narco-terrorist?
Yes, but it enables them because they're going to try to make that point. They're going to try to make that point that he's very actively involved, despite a rather passive involvement. But then you have this as well, exactly the same case in Honduras, basically, with Juan Orlando Hernandez, and he's being pardoned for this exact or very similar role. And deal, for example, in this case, Maduro and the Tren Aragua, but Juan Orlando Hernandez with the MS-13. And those cases are made, but then often dismissed again.
Trump says that the U.S., of course, will run Venezuela. We also know that Delcy Rodriguez has been installed as the interim president. she was very much a part of the Maduro regime. She was the second in command there. How do we square what's going on right now? That is, the Trump administration saying that they will run the country, and Delcy Rodriguez publicly saying that Maduro should be brought back into the country and that he's the only president of the country.
Well, right, what we know is that we don't know what's going to happen, pretty much.
Yeah.
But what we're also still seeing is how will the Venezuelan armed forces react to all of this, right? It's very, very hard or basically impossible to govern a country from a different country, so remotely governing. And it really depends on, because Maduro does have followers, he does have an army that has followed him also in the past. So now the question rather is, will this fracture happen or not? And I mean, the US has said that they're not opposed to boots on the ground for the military intervention, but how bloody that interaction or that intervention will be, that's something that we just have to see if it develops.
Understood. That's Fritz Pinnow, journalist and documentary photographer. Many thanks, Fritz.